It's time for the Week in Review. Look at national, regional, and local stories from the past week. Here's Brandon Hansen, Managing Editor of the Chewelah Independent, and Scott Allen, Managing Director of Northern Lights Public Radio.
Welcome to the show. I'm Scott.
And I'm Brandon.
First story up today I have, Brandon, is the climate change report that came out and the statement that it'll damage the U.S. economy. As California's catastrophic wildfires recede and people rebuild after 2 hurricanes, a massive new federal report warns that these types of disasters are worsening in the United States because of global warming. The White House report, quietly issued Friday, that'd be last Friday, of course, also frequently contradicts President Donald Trump. The National Climate Assessment was written long before the deadly fires in California this month and before Hurricanes Florence and Michael raked the East Coast and Florida. It says warming-charged extremes have already become more frequent, intense, widespread, or of longer duration. The report notes that the last few years have smashed U.S. records for damaging weather, costing nearly $400 billion since 2015. And right here in Stevens County, we've experienced this too with the fires.
Yes, fires and even flooding. I mean, we had some flood damage this year and the year before, where some, high snowpack, rainy springs caused some things to wash out, and that caused damage as well. Remember, the Highway 395 was underwater for like a month. I don't remember that at all growing up.
Well, and it's kind of the same thing for me. I've got 20 plus years on you, Brandon, and I grew up here too, and I've never seen anything like that. Our skies, when I was a kid, you never saw them filled with smoke.
Right.
And now what? How many years have we had this every summer?
Yes, every summer. It becomes a season into its own, I guess.
And it's slowly, when you watch, we've been watching what happens in California for years, and it's creeping north.
Yes, it's kind of a preview of things to come, you might say, or at least it seems that way.
And what I find, and I've said this on the radio before, that I hate the debate about whether climate change or global warming is real. And I've always wanted to take the position that it doesn't matter whether it's real or not, it's happening. And I should reword that. I should say it doesn't matter whether it's man-made or natural. Rather than using the word real, that was kind of dumb. It doesn't matter whether it's man-made or natural. It's happening, and we can see it all around us. So I wish we could turn the tables and just say, what can we do as human beings to have the least footprint? So that we can always say, hey, we're having the least impact possible on the, because it might be natural. It might be us. I don't want to argue that. The fact is it's happening. How can we just join together and make our footprint the smallest as possible?
And this is when politics kind of get involved and just mess the whole thing up, because you get two sides that just hate each other, and that's how it goes. What I would like to say is, we need to start doing things, whether it's forest management, which I am 100% behind.
And you kind of come from a logging family.
Yes, I come from a logging family, and I completely believe that forests need to be managed, because otherwise they're going to burn up. So we should at least thin them, which makes them more fire resistant. I don't think it's a cure-all for, hey, if we, thin this section, it'll never burn again. That's very wishful thinking. That you're basically denying physics that things will dry out and not burn. That's not true, but thinning certainly causes wildfire to spread less or slower. So what you see is something like this summer, where if given time to react and kind of contain those fires, firefighters were able to keep a lot of fires that could have gotten out of control or much bigger. They were able to attack it quickly and keep the damage to a minimum, which is something in thin forests you would see that a lot more, as opposed to unmanaged forests, where those could get rip-roaring in a hurry. And then, once those fires get to a certain size and create its own wind patterns and all that, it's kind of hard to get in their way. So I would say, we need to do kind of a twofold thing, where it's like manage the forests, do what you can to reduce fuels and things like that, but also consider, hey, it's going to keep getting warmer, or we're having this pattern where we're having warm summers. I mean, you see it right now. It's almost December, and I can still wear shorts outside. This time, even last year it was cold, and this is kind
we
of
had snow on the ground.
Right. It's a La Nina thing on weather patterns like this, but that it's becoming more of a more common theme where we're having mild winters.
Yes.
It seems like the big winters only happen now once every decade, once every 5 years, where we'll have a good solid winter.
There was the year before I moved here. I moved back here in 2009. The year before I moved back, 2008, huge amount of snow.
Right.
In this general area, Spokane and everything. A buddy of mine in Spokane, I was living in the Midwest. He sent me pictures of 3 feet of snow on his deck. Well, I moved back in 2009. It's 2018. I haven't seen 3 feet of snow in the valley.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And weather is one of those weird things where you'll have up and down years, and it kind of looks like the stock market with the temperatures and the snow levels and stuff. But what you're looking at is like an average. I've talked to people that have lived here for years, and they say, hey, it's drier. Used to be wetter back in the day in certain points and things like that. Winters used to be colder. Winters used to be more snow on the ground kind of deal. So that is changing. And at this point, you just have to deal with reality and not get on the politics of, that's not true or things like that. We just have to, what we as a community have to do is react to the smoke being in the air for 2 months out of the year. How do we combat that? What do we have to do? What does the DNR
You know what I
have
noticed
to do?
when the smoke's in the air here locally in Stevens County? Nobody argues about climate change. They don't. It's because it's in your face, and something's wrong.
Well,
and I'm just going to throw in, since I have a property up at Kettle Falls, and the big Kettle Falls fire, it's really eerie because I was walking on the back of my property on a road,
right,
and I'm looking down and I'm thinking, if I bumped 2 rocks together hard enough, this whole place would start fire. It was so dry in August.
Right.
And I say that, and I walk to the front of the property, and within 5 minutes, I turn around and I see the first plumes of smoke from that fire coming directly at me. And I'm just like, no way.
Right.
And then here comes a siren, and somebody on the top ridge of the cliff that's beside me, I can see the fire truck heading out, and I'm going, drive faster.
Right.
And here's what was impressive. They were ready. It's kind of like the stuff they were so ready for it. Within 10 minutes, aircraft were here.
Yes.
And they hammered it for trying to stop it for maybe 30 minutes till there was so much white steam in the air, they had to stop because they couldn't see anymore.
Yes.
And it was just out of control.
And that fire...
And that's scary. That's, you say, because you're talking about forest management, and I'm not saying we don't need to do that at all, but I'm saying sometimes it's not going to matter how much forest management we do because of the climate. Because the one in Kettle, wasn't it started by a lightning power line coming down and hitting the grass?
I can't confirm that, but that's what I've heard.
Yeah, that's what I heard. So but there are things like that are going to happen. A hubcap's going to fly off, skip on the pavement, and start the brush on fire on the side of the road. There's some things we just, how much can you mow?
Yeah, or rake, right?
Yeah.
You got to rake those forests. But that's my thing, and I just don't want to get in the debate of things are fine or something. No, we are having dry summers where fire danger is extreme, and we need to continue to pump money into our firefighting resources. Mm-hmm. And my thing is, you just have to react to the reality that you're in and not get into this, my political party is right, your political party is wrong. No, we just have to react to the reality that we have summers that are extremely dry. We have wildfires. You look at that California town in, what was it called, Paradise?
Yeah.
And just so burned up.
Yeah.
And to me, that is terrifying because I look around Chewelah and I see all these forests around here. Something like that, I'm sorry, could happen here. And at least Chewelah has enough escape routes that what I heard about Paradise was there was no way to really get in or out of that town except for, just one route north-south or something. But it's something that we should take a look at and be like, okay, what can we do to either prevent that? What can we do to have, escape plans?
And we've got places to look to see what's been working and what's not.
Yes.
By looking at California, because I think we're headed in that same direction. So.
Well, and you can look at that as a warning and say, well, how do they manage their forests? What are they doing right and wrong? you have to have that conversation. You have to have that conversation in terms of how many firefighting resources, what does that state do to combat. You've seen the Washington DNR completely change their strategy, where, like you said, now they have aircraft on call that can react to a fire in 10 minutes. That's a big change from years past, where, remember, the big fire season we had, I believe it was 2015, where the big Carpenter complex fire hit and everything like that. And the stories you were hearing was we had maybe one guy on a bulldozer fighting the fire, and that was it. Before actual resources got called in, that has completely changed. So
it was amazing, the reaction up at Kettle Falls.
Right.
And just think, that was only a 4,000 acre fire, and they have 50,000 acres. And how much smoke we had. Imagine if it was 50,000 acres, like down in California.
Yes.
Now, granted, we had tons of wood in the trees up there, and how horrendous that smoke was.
Right.
For 2 weeks, I think, out of that particular. We had a longer time of smoke, but that fire really added to it for at least 2 weeks. I couldn't imagine if that was 40,000 acres on the border of the U.S. and Canada. That's crazy.
And what does that do to our economy, where we have summer tourism and they come up here to go to the lake or go camping and they can't breathe?
It was my first year living up at my place in Kettle Falls, and I lost, a good chunk of the summer being evacuated and stuff.
Right.
And I was thinking, this is going to happen to me every other year.
Right.
Even
right.
I want to sell.
Yeah.
I'm not
exactly.
going to deal with that. So yeah, it's just the danger factor and losing your beyond your property, whatever you have of stuff that might not be insured. And when you have a woodland place that's a getaway, a lot of it isn't insured. So can people in those and a lot of times people that living out farther in the woods are of lower income, so maybe they don't have the insurances they stuff need. And if fire comes through, you lose everything. So
right. And I just, again, to me, it isn't a climate change thing as much as it's just a reality that we're having more forest fires, and we have to deal with that reality. My dad has one of these woodland getaways you're talking about, the house he lives, and we're going to be moving up there. But that's one. It was under basic evacuation orders when the Carpenter fire hit, and it makes me wonder, well, do I want to move my stuff up there if we have another big fire? Well, there goes all my stuff. Maybe I want to stay in town, might be a little safer. So it's all these factors that we now just have to consider as a reality, and not just, something that might in a blue moon happen. It's happening every year now. And then you consider the smoke in the air. How is that going to affect your health? How is that going to affect my health if every summer we're sucking down smoke worse than, Beijing and one of the big metro areas? That's going to cause issues, and it may cause people to move away. I hate to be alarmist, but it is the truth, and it's something we really have to consider.
Another facet of this, I dealt with the radio station, and I don't want to poo-poo on the two counties I'm going to talk about, but it is an example. First, I'll give a positive before I give these negatives about Farragut County and Stevens County. Is the difference of reaction and control of the Carpenter complex fire versus the one that happened up at what they called the Boyd's fire up at Kettle Falls was amazing. We've made good strides.
Yes.
On managing these fires and getting the stuff we need. Just like the plains when I was talking about, within 10, 15 minutes, that Boyd's fire was being hammered. They gave it their all.
Right.
I mean, it was an awesome attempt. It was awesome to watch. It was like almost being in a war zone. It was crazy. But here's the problem in a public safety kind of from a standpoint. I had to fight during the Carpenter complex to get Stevens County to activate the emergency alert system. I was fought with over it that it wasn't important. And I'm saying, hey, cell phones go dead, power lines burn down, hyperreach cannot save everyone, and this is just another tool that we could use in case somebody's telephone line burned down, in case their cell phone battery's out. How are they going to get the information they need? So we got it straightened out, and they started using it. And the sheriff's department was awesome about it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But it took a while to get it going, and I had to fight to get them to pay attention. Say, here's another tool. The government requires the radio station to maintain this expensive equipment, and there's tons of man hours in the maintenance of this equipment, money in the purchase of the equipment, and you have to do it, and then you have agencies that aren't utilizing this tool.
Right.
Same thing happened in the Boyd's fire. It was in Ferry County. Stevens County was lending the assistance, but it was a Ferry County issue. And I went to Stevens County and said, hey, emergency alert system isn't going off. Well, you're going to have to take that up with Ferry County. And I'm going to say, I contacted them twice, and then I gave up.
Right.
They never responded.
And that has something to do with, these county governments, which aren't that big, not being
I realized the ferry was tapped with resources,
right.
but I was offering them a resource.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's, one thing, it seems to be a common theme, is small county governments. I mean, these aren't big organizations.
No, and Ferry County's got a hard spot, though.
Right.
It's so great that Stevens County stepped up
right.
and helped
but
out
like you
because
said,
they weren't prepared for it.
It took a few years for them to kind of
Sure.
come around, and that's any small... they're just probably just reacting to their tail for the most part and things like that. So.
We've spent a ton of time on this story. I'll finish the one I had started before we put in our commentary here, whether you like that or not. The last part of that story was the recent Northern California wildfires can be attributed to climate change, and this is from the report from the government, but there was less of a connection to those in Southern California, said the co-author William Holstein. He's from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The report is mandated by law every few years and is based on more than 1,000 previous research studies. It detailed how global warming from the burning of coal, oil, and gas is hurting each region in the United States and how it impacts different sectors of the economy, including energy and agriculture. You were trying to play on that. What's this costing us truly monetarily with the ripple effect?
Right. And, with the burning of coal, oil, and gas and these kind of things, the only thing that really discourages me is the only government reaction to that has been employ a tax. And employ the tax on the people. And that just kind of doesn't jive with me. It's just more of a way to get money, not actually make results that could cut back. Because whether you believe in greenhouse gases or not, coal, oil, and gas, guess what? Are finite resources. So it's like the person that just keeps pulling money from their bank account without going to work.
Eventually it runs out.
Eventually it runs out. And
I'm going to go ahead and say that would be a good thing.
Right. Right.
Because we have other technology we could use.
We do. And coal, oil, and gas, as much as we like to say it's clean, anybody that deals loggers and stuff, they come home all greasy and stuff. It's
how clean is it?
I'm just saying anybody that has dealt with fuels and things like that know that this can be a mess and it can cause messes. You have those oil tankers going through Spokane. So just what is the sustainability? But renewable energy, they have their issues too. How much is those lithium batteries? How many hard metals are in those engines in those electric cars and stuff?
Oh, yeah. And now they're even going so far as saying that turbines, the wind turbines, not only causing problems with bird habitat and that type of stuff, but actually changing the climate in that particular area in a close proximity because of how it's changing the wind and diversion of the wind. There's also, it's like everything we do causes a problem on the flip side.
Right. But that's kind of how this rock works, So you're going to have reactions. And just one thing to me is just, with the coal, oil, and gas, I just don't know how anybody can think, hey, let's just keep running this as hard and as fast as we can. At some point you have to realize our population is growing, and if we continue to use these unrenewable resources, it's going to cause some issues there.
One thing I was surprised in this story, we've pretty much covered everything else that was in it, what they were saying as effects as far as economy and nature systems. But they said as well as the worsening air pollution causing heart and lung problems, more diseases from insects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I've heard
kills.
correlation of that with tree diseases and insects that come into an area that weren't there before and cause problems.
Yes, definitely. And bug kills in trees, horrible. And again, if you don't manage those forests, that's what happens. Bugs move in, kill all these trees, and then you have all this dead wood that is lovely wildfire fuel.
Wow. All right, we have another one that kind of runs right up against this, Colville National Forest and some controversy.
A proposal that would have more than quadrupled the amount of protected wilderness in eastern Washington came to a screeching halt earlier this fall. The Colville National Forest released its draft management plan on September 8th. To the surprise of conservation groups and one of the area's largest timber producers, the draft didn't contain many recommendations hammered out over years of give and takes between stakeholders in the whole process there. In particular, under the draft plan, about 60,000 acres of the Colville National Forest would be designated as recommended wilderness. A coalition represents environmental, industrial, and recreation interests, originally proposed more than 200,000 acres, according to Mike Peterson, the executive director of the Lands Council and founding member of the Northeast Washington Forestry Coalition. However, county commissioners from Pend Oreille, Stevens, and Ferry counties do not support increasing the recommended wilderness area, nor does the cattle industry. The Forest Service cited that opposition as a reason for reducing the amount of proposed wilderness. As part of the compromise, the Forest Plan championed the NEWC or FC calls for increased logging on other parts of the Colville National Forest, which is awesome. Another thing is they've been using new trails in the National Forest for bikers, motorcyclists, and ATV riders. That's going to be a huge thing for this if we can really become a tourist destination for all those riders and stuff that come up here.
And it seems what I've heard of that, it seems like a neat plan of taking when they're doing the forestry to make parking areas and that type of stuff for people.
Very cool to utilize it like that if we can keep the smoke out. The collaboration between industry and conservation groups was praised by Vicki Christensen, the interim chief of the U.S. Forest Service. This was a story a few months ago. She and U.S. Rep. Kathy McMorris-Rogers, they toured the Colville National Forest where Vaughan's brothers are logging small diameter trees. You know, the A to Z project, it just really seems like things are changing where we can utilize the forest more and not just lock them up and say, hey, nobody can use them or anything like that. It seems like we're reaching good compromises where these groups aren't hating each other. They're actually working with each other, which is fantastic. But again, the U.S. Forest Service, instead of doing the recommended by the these conservation and groups like Vaughan's, instead of them recommending 200,000 wilderness acres, the Forest Service released their proposed plan and said only about 60,000 acres. Again, we kind of mentioned the county commissioners. This story in the spokesman, Russ Vaughan did not have nice things to say about the commissioners or kind of the special interest groups, as he said. And I think it has to do with, Vaughan's is trying to make a go at working with these conservation groups while continuing to be an economic engine in this area.
Definitely.
And
look at the jobs and
right. And if you can make that give or take, say, hey, this is going to remain forest land and we're going to log it and we're going to manage it and we're going to get money from this and create jobs out of this, and you can have your wilderness land over the, the mountain range or something like that. There is only currently one designated wilderness area. I can't pronounce it. It's like the Sameo Wilderness, and it's, I believe, about 30 or 40,000 acres of wilderness. Now, I was actually talking to somebody today about, what's wilderness mean and all this kind of stuff.
Sure. Does that mean protected, unprotected, vehicles, no vehicles?
Essentially no vehicles kind of deal. It's, limited access, no roads or things like that. And you don't want people running motors in those wilderness. They're wilderness, basically, where others are kind of managed forest lands. Some people would say, hey, they need to manage them more. But wilderness is kind of, you kind of leave it a little more to nature kind of deal, which is good or bad. We just talked about forest fires. Leaving it to nature, that can create, lots of...
Nature can take its course with lightning.
Yeah, whether you like it or not there. But I did read in this spokesman article that, government agencies will still fight fires in these wildernesses. They won't let them burn.
They can just continue.
Right. They'll send smoke jumpers in and things like that. But you have to consider there's no roads to access those areas, so it becomes much more difficult. Yeah. And, I think the cattle producers and the commissioners want more local control of the forests, and they also want to be able to use them for grazing and things like that. One thing I am going to editorialize here, I'm slightly worried with passing it over to local control or having more local control in these federal areas because if it goes private, somebody can buy that land and lock it up and nobody can go in there. Or B, you can have a county government we just described here that are small governments. They don't have big budgets. How do you expect them to properly manage these large sections of land? So I'm kind of concerned with that mindset there, but I understand. It's frustrating when you have all this federal forest land in your backyard, you don't get a say in it, and you get somebody or federal government saying, hey, we want to turn all this into wilderness, and you can't access it anymore. That's an issue.
It makes people unhappy too.
Yes, very unhappy there. So, and another thing. Ooh,
This is like an environmental show we didn't know we were doing today.
Yeah, a logger son and a Chewelah boy here, so lovely. But yeah, just for the record, all my family members out there, I am pro forest management.
All right.
Just got to get that on the record. But
It's a valuable resource.
Yes.
And part of keeping the forest safe and not burning is keeping those economic resources safe too. So.
yeah, and what's the use of all this wood if it burns up? That's what I gotta say. What's the use?
Yeah. Then what are we doing, right?
And those forest fires kill a lot of animals too. So, you got to keep managing it. But the problem is, just from my logger perspective, I work for a logging magazine too. One issue we're really going to have is all these loggers are getting older. My generation hasn't really got into logging, and certainly not the younger generation. A lot of guys are 50, 60. Well, guess they're not going to be logging at age 70 or 80, although some guys try, and it's hilarious. So we have a shortage of loggers and truck drivers right now.
And more young people probably going into the tech industry
Yes.
because it's exciting and new and fresh. And
yes.
And
you don't have to get up at 2 a.m. in the morning. So that's going to be an issue, and I do see a lot of these politicians saying, we need more forest management. But what they don't tell you is we may not have enough loggers to, manage all this vast federal land, and that's going to become a big issue, I will say, in the next 10 to 20 years. Right. So that's my strong take.
That's your strong take. We're going to take a short break, and we will be back. We're going to keep going with this environmental thing. We've got one more about plastic.
Okay.
All right. You're listening to Scott and Brandon, and it is the Week in Review. All right, thanks for staying with us. It's the Week in Review with Brandon Hanson and me, Scott Allen. Here we are. We've been just kind of hitting a lot of environmental issues in this week's program, but it's stuff that's coming up in the news, and it's stuff that definitely affects us locally. Maybe not so much the next one, but maybe so. And I know a lot of people have varying opinions on this because of straws and what's gone on over the coast, but plastic bags could be banned by the state legislature.
Yeah, according to a report from King 5 News, Representative Strom Peterson plans to introduce a bill in the House that limits the use of plastic bags in the 2019 session, and Senator Kevin Ranker will be doing the same in the state Senate. This announcement was made Wednesday from the Seattle Aquarium about the bill by state leaders. The proposed bill would enact statewide that there would be a ban on single-use plastic bags and would add a 10-cent tax on all paper bags in an effort to encourage consumers to utilize their own reusable bags, the King 5 article said. The bill would also require use of recycled material bags. The bill is being introduced in an effort to control the amount of non-renewable resources consumed and reduce the amount of pollution created by plastic use. There would be some exemptions to the tax, including plastics used on produce, flowers, prescription drugs, meats, fish, and newspapers. Oh, thank goodness. The King 5 article said people receiving food assistance from the state would also be exempt from the fee. Currently, 19 local and county jurisdictions in the state of Washington have laws regarding the use of plastics. All but one, Ellensburg, are located on the west side of the state. So this will become a west versus east issue, I'm sure.
Should it, though?
Not really. This certainly became an issue. I actually heard this from a buddy 5-10 years ago. This happening in Issaquah, and they'd have these people camped outside the Safeway, signing an initiative, and trying to get the local county ban on these plastic bags just to go away, basically. One thing about plastics is they don't recycle all that well in terms of these plastic bags and things like that.
And they're breaking up into microscopic particles. We found out over the years a lot of different things, even makeups and stuff going into the oceans. And earlier this summer, they had 3 different species of whale wash up in California, and when they analyzed them and did biopsies on them, they all had huge amounts of microscopic plastics in their stomachs.
There, yeah. And in terms of plastic bags, it just, to me, it creates a trash issue, because what do you do with these plastic bags once you're done with them? And it's kind of a one-and-done thing. And the thing about all of our plastics is it's petroleum-based or fuel-based. Mm-hmm. So, again, we already talked about this, non-renewable resources going into a single-use bag doesn't make sense, so I can kind of see that. But on the other hand, again, it's government telling us what not to do.
Well, maybe if you take a trip over to Seattle on a visit or something, go down to the waterfront and walk along it and look at all the plastic bags in the water. You know, if we're over here going,
Right.
oh, that's a West Side thing. We don't need that over here. Go take a trip over there and see it. And what's it really going to inconvenience us? Not much.
I would say, yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Just have like a canvas bag or something. You know, put your groceries in there or something. It's not going to be the biggest change in the world, but you know, you change.
We get so afraid of change for
Yeah.
some reason, and like this is a simple one. Why be afraid of it? It's obvious plastic isn't good for us. Eat some and see how you feel.
Yeah, exactly. I think the only change would be, oh, now I have to buy a reusable bag or something like that, or I have to pay a tax. That's my thing, is you just slap a tax on it and punish
and
the
that's
people.
the problem I'm going to have with this too. Is why did they need to add? Just get rid of the plastic
make
bag.
money.
Don't add a tax
To make money.
And that's the problem. Washington State. I'm sorry, but they are so greedy about stuff like that. It gets to a point where it's ridiculous, and that's ridiculous. They could get rid of plastic bags without adding a tax.
Well, you know how they can get rid of this without even affecting us is just make sure that the grocery stores don't give out plastic bags. Work with them.
Problem
Simple
solved.
as that. Yeah, problem
Make it
solved.
illegal for them.
Yeah, that's it. You don't have to tax
Why are we
us.
going through all these other steps when we could just make it illegal for businesses?
Yeah, exactly. And one thing maybe Safeway.
And I'm sure
Safeway
there's business
always,
owners went, ooh,
Yeah.
he said that, but...
let's go after him, burn down the radio station. But I mean, Safeway already has reusable bags there, so I think it would just be a change people would have to get used to. And like
That's
you
my
said,
point.
it's
We
a
resist it.
hard thing to do, and it's especially hard when the West Side, as you can tell by the, all these jurisdictions right now being on the West Side already doing this, and now they want to make it statewide. You can see why
They're
there's
trying
this
to push on it.
east-west.
The tax
yeah.
thing's they're going to be the one that kills that. And I
Yeah.
got an issue with it, too. The plastic bags going away, that's a no-brainer.
Right. Well, even on the
Why
West.
ruin it? Here's a no-brainer, and we're going to ruin it by adding a tax.
Right.
I'm starting to get mad. We should.
Well, you're turning red there. But
I'm starting to get really mad.
there's people on the West Side that don't like the plastic bag ban in their certain areas, whether it's a town or a county or a city there. Like my buddy said, he's like, man, people get so worked up over these plastic
Over a
bag bans.
plastic bag.
And he's just like, I just take my bag to the store and pick it up, and it's fine. And
If you start getting worked up about your plastic bag, I suggest just holding it over your head for about 15 seconds.
goodness.
Calm down.
I did after reading the story. I thought, because I use the plastic bags from the store and I save them.
Me too.
And I'm just
Yeah.
like, where am I going to put all my garbage? Where am I going to put this? Like when I go on road trips, I always grab a plastic bag and throw like my spare hats or spare shoes, or it's a little extra storage.
That's going to be the next thing from the West Side, is they're going to want to tax us for using garbage bags too.
Oh, Scott,
Stop.
you're going to give everybody high blood pressure.
I'm going to take the hippies advocate on this story as we come to the end of it, okay? Are you ready?
Okay.
Now, we could be making plastic bags out of other things that aren't harmful. Just like they started, I don't know if they're still doing it at Riverfront Park, but there was one year where they served plastic-looking cups that were made from corn.
Really?
And they're out there. They're biodegradable.
Cool.
And they look just like a plastic cup. To me, it felt just like a plastic cup. I don't know if Riverfront Park, if it was just that 1 year thing or if they kept it out, but I've heard of other parks now doing this because of the issues with plastics, and especially with places, like a SeaWorld or a Walt Disney World or whatever. There's so many people going through there. So there's these corn-based products, but then, of course, there's the flip side of it, just like we were talking, there's the flip side of everything, is, now all of our corn, it's not going to food, it's making cups.
Right.
Okay,
right.
which could cause some kind of problem. I don't know. The other thing is with the legalization of marijuana happening pretty quickly
I see where you're
across
going.
the country.
I see where you're going
Why
with
aren't we
this.
making them out of hemp? You can make
Right.
a lot. They say, now I'm not a scientist and I don't have any factual proof on this, but I've heard several times and I've read it on the internet, so it must be true.
Right.
That you can make plastics, even like Tupperware, through the oil from hemp.
Interesting. Well, that would be better than fossil fuels you have to drill underground for a long time for, and you could just grow it. That is interesting. As a logger
And if
son,
you're doing that, you can see, okay, where one industry suffers, maybe the companies that make plastic bags, but you got a new industry that's picking it up.
yeah, and it might
So
even
those
be
jobs
local.
might transfer buildings
Right.
but they won't go away necessarily.
Well, and hemp can grow basically anywhere. It's like a weed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a weed. That was a joke.
And for people
Scott.
that don't know, hemp is in the marijuana family, but it's not psychoactive.
Right. But that's the thing. That plant basically grows anywhere, so you could be growing hemp around here or something like that, where, if you're getting that petroleum, I don't know of any oil wells around here.
You got to wonder what happened in our history. And I know they said, marijuana and hemp were demonized because of, and no, I'm not picking on you and your family history, but because of the wood products industry. Because it would have, if we would have made,
industry?
if we switch, which we could do today, if we switch to making all of our paper products from hemp, it would decimate wood products industry.
I could see that.
But we could do it.
Yeah, we could do it.
And would that be better for the environment? It depends on how it's done, probably.
Well,
there's a flip side to everything.
Yeah, there's a flip
what
side
kind
to
of
everything.
chemicals are they ending up with after that? Is
Yeah.
it really changing anything? But there is things we could do. If 100 years from now we're running out of trees,
Yeah.
we could be making our paper products out of hemp. There's just other things we could do, and that plant has been so demonized because of the psychoactive properties of it and whatever else. When it first they realized it in societies, the industrial age was happening. Not only was it poised to decimate the wood products energy, but also the oil products industry was at risk. So it was a lot easier to make it. So I understand why they might have made marijuana illegal, but why did they make hemp illegal? It was to protect those industries.
Well,
and now we have another option, but again, that's change, and it's a process of change, and it hurts some people and helps other people, and how do we get through that?
Yeah. Well, as a logger son, I will just say if getting rid of plastic bags means more paper bags, I'm for that as well. So let's bring on the paper bags.
And as kind of a hippie, I'm totally hooked up with that. If those forests are being managed and replanted and all that good stuff too.
Yeah.
And I think for any logging company that isn't replanting forests, they're kind of cutting their own throat in the long run.
Well, talking to a lot of loggers throughout the years, that's one of their concerns, is always making sure that these units and things will grow back. I've talked to a lot of guys that, are more environmentally focused than a lot of people live in the city and things. I followed one guy that showed me a bunch of forests he had replanted. Others say, hey, my dad logged this, 40 years ago, and here I am.
Look at it today, and I didn't touch it.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of it can happen naturally, I'm sure.
Yeah. So we're just talking about resources, and it can get very complicated, I guess.
All right. Well, this was a different show for the Week in Review, but it just kind of happened that way with the news stories that fell down.
Yes.
Wrapping things up, I got a couple different questions for you.
Gotcha.
And I might be a little out of touch on them, but how did different elections maybe wrap up? And then I know after voting, now there's a big stink out of Republic.
Yeah. So the election was finally certified out of Stevens County. And good news, we had about a 74% voter turnout, which is incredible.
Wow. Good job, Stevens County.
Yeah, about 22,000 votes out of 30,000 were cast, and that's a great number. And one person put it, well, this is an off-year election. Like, this isn't a presidential election, which usually has a higher turnout. This is just your run-of-the-mill midterm, not a great deal going on. It should be like down in the 50s or 40% voter turnout, but we got it up to 74%.
I think we realize maybe that we feel powerless sometimes with the national elections.
Yes.
But I think we've seen, and not to go back to that thing, even with when the marijuana law passed, that people can affect change more easily on the local level. And I think there was so much contention in some of the races that people were compelled to go out and make that difference.
And I say that a lot is, you can sit there and complain about Trump or you can complain about this. Guess who's making the biggest impact on your life? People sitting up in Colville, the people sitting up in your state legislature. So those are the people you want to focus on. The national stuff, it seems like the two parties just like to keep the status quo and blame each other. So
and like the sheriff's race, it is very important because a lot of people don't know. I mean, our government has went really out of control on what they control over us as a state. Right. And I couldn't recite them to what they are. I have read it before, but there's actually only 4 areas that the government is supposed to be helping us with as a state.
And it's kind of
and
grown.
the person,
is grown.
The one position that can stand up to that, and most people don't know this, the power of a county sheriff is
good
huge if they
segue.
use it in the right way.
Good segue. That moves.
The power of a county sheriff is huge. It is huge. They can actually fight the federal government.
Right. And
Most of them don't, but they
Most of them
can.
don't.
And we got one doing it close by.
Yes, not a sheriff, but the city police chief, a Republic, has basically said, that gun initiative we've talked about. He said that he is not going to enforce it within the city limits of Republic, which is over in Ferry County. He has presented an ordinance to the Republic City Council, making Republic kind of a sanctuary city. Not really following those gun control laws of that initiative there. So he has presented that to the city council. The city council said, hey, we need a few weeks to look after this. I've read a few articles where it appears the mayor and one of the city council people have at least come out publicly in support of it. I do have some questions about the legality of it, if Republic would have to face some lawsuits and things like that going against state law. I would really be interested to see just kind of how that works out. I already know that this initiative is probably going to go through the courts, might go through some rulings as soon as we start seeing maybe an arrest because of this initiative or something like that. I'm sure it'll work its way up through the court, and the Supreme Court will determine, if it's constitutional or not. But this police chief has taken it upon himself to make an issue about it and say, hey, I'm not going to enforce this. This is unconstitutional. He's all right in doing that.
Now,
Enforcement
and
people
here's what
can.
I'd say to that is if the county sheriff was doing it, I think it'd be legal.
Right.
But I don't know the law well enough either. But I would think just this a police chief of a city, I don't think you have that kind of authority against the state. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, it's such a limited scope. It's just within city limits. How many gun shops does Republic have?
And maybe they do have the right to do that within their city limits.
Oh, they more than likely do. I'm just saying that the scope of it is not as big. I have seen statements, I believe, by the Ferry County and then also Stevens County Sheriff, where they basically say, let's let the courts work this one out. They want to see, and they're not in agreement. I don't think really any law enforcement officers are in agreement of this initiative. I know a lot of, at least law enforcement officers around here, kind of understand how short-staffed they are and feel that people should have the right to defend themselves and, very Second Amendment. And I don't think they agree with it, but necessarily taking a stance against a state law is difficult. It does present some issues there.
Now, you're much more knowledgeable about this one than I am, and I heard stories that part of this law that was going into effect there was some weird stuff in it.
Oh, yes.
Some horrible stuff where if you're carrying a gun, someone gets your gun, uses your gun, you're liable.
Yes, and that's my biggest issue with it. My other biggest issue is the requirement to have it safely stored away. So now if you're a gun owner, if you don't have it safely, in a safe or something like that where nobody can get to it, and somebody does come across it and use it in a crime, you can get charged in something. And to me, the only issue I have with that is if you're using a gun for self-defense, say like a home invasion or something like that, is the robber going to wait for you to crack the safe and grab your gun to defend yourself? So I'm sure a lot of people will have it in a hidden but accessible area. So this makes it much more difficult to defend yourself.
Maybe we should just carry them everywhere we go. Out in the open.
I don't trust
Like
my
Wild
aim.
West.
I don't trust my aim, so I don't carry them. But I will say that I didn't really agree with this initiative. I didn't like it. I didn't like the raising of the age from 18 to 21. We can send them off to war, but they can't buy a semi-auto.
I liked your point. You made that before when we were talking about it. That is an excellent point.
And the other thing with that is I think a semi-auto has been turned into assault weapon. And I don't agree with that too. There's, some firearms that are semi-automatic, but they are not, quote unquote, a combat rifle or something like that. Any gun is dangerous. Any gun is dangerous. We have to consider that. But you know what the most deadly gun out there is?
22.
A handgun.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, a handgun. So banning these rifles, which make a small percentage.
A 22 pistol
Yeah.
kills more people than any other gun.
Yeah. Yeah, and rifle deaths in the country are
and that's a
very
tiny little
small.
gun with a tiny little bullet. It's the bullet that's the dangerous
Yeah,
thing
it's
out
the
of
bullet
that
that's
gun because it's so tiny.
Right.
But yeah, they say that the 22 kills more than anybody else, and there was no ruling on those handguns, was there?
No, there wasn't. Although it goes with the storage
Sure,
laws as well.
the storage laws, yeah.
But yeah, it's a contentious thing. My thing, what I kind of feel that the police chief is doing, I get a sense he might be angling for some political aspirations, just the way as public as he's been with this. It gives
and he's
me
getting attention nationally.
Oh, he is getting attention from Fox News and things like that. Just all the sorts of news outlets, and the video I've seen where before the city council meeting, he's standing out front shaking everybody's hands and things like that. Makes me wonder if he might not have a run for at least county commissioner or something like that. He may even run for representative. I could certainly see that happening, and this is the perfect issue to hop onto.
Well, if he gets a bunch of national attention on him, he might be able to run for governor.
Yeah, there he goes. There he goes there. So, and this is, again, happening over in Republic. Even Stevens County's sheriff has been quoted as saying, hey, I want to keep this in the courts, let them kind of decide.
Sure.
And but I thought this was going to be an enforcement issue from the get-go. Once it passed, I was like, let's see if we actually enforce this, because it's going to be a hard law to enforce.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Which is good too, because it makes you like paranoid. I think I step in my house and see a rifle in the corner.
Well, I think now
trouble.
if I read the law right, it has to be used in a crime for you to be responsible. So, like, if somebody pops in and sees a gun in the pantry or something,
does something bad.
Yeah, but if somebody just stops by and sees a gun there out in the open, that's not illegal. Like, it has to be used in a crime in order for you to be able to to get charged, I guess, there. So.
I heard they're switching this to feet as well. If I trip someone with your foot, you're still responsible.
Yes, very true. Very true.
Sorry. I think that's everything for today. Did we get all the way through it?
Ooh, we got fired up.
All right.
That was
a long one.
Oof.
Ooh. And we hope we got you fired up too. At least
yes.
something.
Send all hate mail to Scott Allen at
Brandon Hanson. All right. And that's our show for today.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Week in Review with Brandon Hanson, Managing Editor of the Chewelah Independent, and Scott Allen, Managing Director of Northern Lights Public Radio. Past episodes are in video format on the Chewelah Independent's website and on KCHW's YouTube channel. This program was recorded and filmed at the KCHW FM studios in Chewelah, Washington.